that for the purposes of this chapter, a state of emergency exists either in St. Christopher and Nevis or in a part of St. Christopher and Nevis. It goes on, a proclamation under subsection 1 shall not be effective unless it includes a declaration that the Governor General is satisfied that a public emergency has arisen. A, because of the possibility that Her Majesty may shortly be at war. B, because of the occurrence of any accident or natural calamity. Or C, because action has been taken by any person, or there is an imminent threat of action by any person of such a nature and so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety or to deprive the community or any substantial portion of the community of supplies or services essential to life. I pause there to say that the WHO has declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. It is indeed a natural calamity that has befallen the people of St. Kitts and the people of Nevis. However, speaking to the safeguards, the constitutional safeguards, Mr. President, Section 19(3) says that every declaration, that is every declaration of a state of emergency, that it shall lapse. And here is what is relevant. When we go to subsection 4, it says a declaration under subsection 1, that is a declaration of a state of emergency, that a state of emergency exists in a part of St. Christopher and Nevis that comprises or includes all or part of the island of Nevis, shall, to the extent that it relates to the island, that is the island of Nevis, lapse. In the case of a declaration made when the Nevis Island Assembly is sitting, at the expiration of a period of 7 days beginning with the date of publication of the declaration, and in any other case, at the expiration of a period of 21 days beginning with the date of publication of the declaration, unless it has in the meantime been approved by resolution of that assembly. Simply put, what we have here is a situation where there is some ambiguity. And whereas there's a school of thought which suggests that in the national sitting in Bastille, the state of emergency that had been declared on the 28th of March, that state of emergency could be continued for the entire Federation by act of the federal or national parliament. There is another school of thought that, pursuant to Section 19(4), Mr. President, that no state of emergency could be extended to the island of Nevis unless the Nevis Island Assembly also passed a resolution continuing it here. Now, this is not a time for fine points of law, and I recognize that lawyers will differ. We are trying to guard against any legal challenge to what is happening on Nevis, bearing in mind that a state of emergency suspends and abrogates the fundamental rights and freedoms of our people. Everyone in this assembly, everyone who's listening knows that we as a people are free to go where we want to go. We are a free society. We assemble, we talk to each other, we go where we want to go. The state of emergency seeks to restrict that. And so one of the fundamental rights which is immediately restricted is our freedom of movement. And so we have to be cognizant that we have no room for uncertainty in terms of what we're doing. And if we are to restrict the rights of the people of Nevis, to continue in our fight against this disease, and to continue in our thrust to keep our people safe, then we must ensure, out of an abundance of caution if necessary, that we do what is necessary. And so based on that advice and based on the effort of the Nevis Island Administration to err on the side of caution, we have today convened this unusual emergency sitting to ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis remain firmly within the constitutional parameters as outlined. Now, I am not standing here to say that I am a constitutional scholar, Mr. President, and so I know exactly what is meant. What I can say is that I yesterday would have had discussions with the Honorable Attorney General. Yesterday I would have had discussions with our legal advisor, Mrs. Helen Lewis, and I even took the liberty of having a discussion with His Excellency, our Governor General, who, as you know, is a learned lawyer himself, having been our first Attorney General after independence. I also took the opportunity to speak to our Deputy Governor General, Her Honor Hailita Liebert. And I believe that from all of that emerged the view that it was better to be safe than sorry. That rather than leaving it to a question of interpretation, we rather come here and put it beyond doubt. And so that is why we are here this morning. I am aware that there has been some concern as to the lateness, if you will, of the notice. And certainly all of us who are here have been inconvenienced to some extent. And I could appreciate that the new member, the member opposite, the honorable member opposite, to be sworn in would have had very short notice as well. For that, I can only apologize, but say that there was absolutely no choice in the circumstances. We could not move before the Federal or National Assembly had moved, and at the time, we had thought that there would be no need to move. And so, as you are well aware, Mr. President, we had been having discussions about convening this Honorable House in the coming week. But the circumstances that have presented themselves are such that we cannot risk the state of emergency on the island of Nevis being called into question. And so we had to convene the House today. And having convened the House today, we could not convene the House without offering the honorable member an opportunity to be sworn in. That would not have been proper. And so we had to extend the invitation to the honorable member opposite to be sworn in today despite the peculiar circumstances. And that is what we have done in the circumstances. And I'm grateful that she has accepted the invitation and has been sworn in to get about the business of representing her constituents in this honorable Parliament. Mr. President, the resolution, therefore, I have sought to put it in context. How have we got here? We've got here because some time ago we heard about a place in China called Wuhan. I have never been to Wuhan. I don't know if anybody here knows Wuhan. And when we heard about Wuhan, I think many of us heard it as just another news item. The truth is that Wuhan has now come to Charlestown. And whether we like it or not, this global village that we speak about all the time, saying that the world is a global village, well, this is the reality of that global village. It is not only goods that we get from China, we get other things. And Corona looks like one of those things that has come to us. And it is unfortunate that this Corona virus has disrupted the world. But what are we to do? And what is any government to do? In my view, the role of this government, and the only role, the exclusive role of this government at this point, is to see about the safety and security of our people. I never thought, and I said it yesterday in the National Assembly, that we would ever allow masked men and women into our Parliament. I never thought that we would allow masked men and women into our banks. Normally, if you go in a bank with a mask, they call the police forthwith. But that is our reality. As we look now at the gallery, we see people sitting apart. We look at what we have tried to do here in a small space to ensure that we maintain some distance. And everybody in here is wearing a mask. That is the new reality. And I think that our people, difficult as it is, and I don't seek to minimize the difficulty, must appreciate that we do have a new reality that we must exist with and ultimately overcome. The purpose, Mr. President, of the state of emergency is to allow the government, federal government, but also the Nevis Island administration, the necessary room to maneuver. Bearing in mind that this disease and the information on it are rapidly evolving. Nearly every day we hear something new. We are hearing about vaccines and vaccine trials. We're hearing about treatments. We do not know, although we pray, that in another week or two there may not be a breakthrough. But until that time, we have to preserve the tools that we have deployed to fight this COVID-19. And you can't tell people in Nevis to stay home or tap home, to use colloquialism, unless you have a legal framework to do it. Otherwise, people will say, well, there's no legal framework, you can't tell me stay home. Otherwise, the police can only encourage you, but they can't arrest you. We need the framework of the state of emergency to allow us to continue to enforce the things that we have been seeking to do. And I think on balance, there has been some measure of success. I say that timidly, because we do not know what tomorrow will bring. St. Kitts Nevis at one point was only at 2 cases. And then overnight we jumped to 7. My math isn't so good, but that's several 100% increase overnight. Nevis has seen a steady, one, then another, then another, then another. Thus far, we have had no new cases in Nevis. And thus far, I'm advised that in Nevis, all 4 persons who have tested positive are in excellent health. As a matter of fact, I'm advised that they're now, some of them, going through the process of emerging on the other side. There's a process before you can be declared recovered, and they're working on that. And I pray that God continues to assist us in that regard. We have been lucky. Well, let me not say lucky. God has blessed us. Let me use that language. Because thus far, even with 14 cases, we have no one who's hospitalized. And as we watch our television sets every day, we see in Italy, New York, across the United States, across the United Kingdom, that the biggest problem is the overwhelming of the health facilities. We understand that the health systems here are fragile. And that if we had a contagion where many people had to be hospitalized, it would create a problem for us. And so we are blessed that thus far our hospital facilities have not been called upon, and that our people, even those 4 who have tested positive, are in good shape. That, however, Mr. President, does not mean that as the Premier of Nevis, I get down on my knees and pray, as I try to do as often as I can, and then having prayed, I said, well, that's enough. I don't know where it is said, but they say God helps those who help themselves. And so we have been trying to help ourselves. And I'd want to commend the work of all of the ministers, because in their different areas, they have been working hard. Our permanent secretaries, who have developed a chat group and who on a daily basis are engaging with each other. Our local COVID-19 task force, headed by Dr. Judy Nisbet, who brings accurate information, relevant information, and who, with her team, have been manning our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center at Long Point, 24 hours a day. Mr. President, I want to emphasize that. 24 hours a day. That means when we are sleeping, people are at the EOC working, getting information, collating it, ensuring that we are where we need to be. Through the efforts of the Honorable Senator, Junior Minister Hazel Brandy Williams, we have procured well-needed supplies. We have new ventilators. We have ambulances that are en route, she has advised. We have other ventilators that are en route. We have masks. We have all the cleaning and other necessary supplies that we are told we should have. We have medication that has been recommended. We have created a quarantine center, 14 apartment center, I'm advised. We have created an isolation center off-site from our hospital which can accommodate 8 persons. We have at our hospital allocated 16 beds to COVID if it were to get to that. So, mark you, I'm saying that at this point, we have been blessed that no one has needed hospital care. But I'm just outlining the things that we have done, nevertheless, to ensure, Mr. President, if we were to get there, that we are in a state where we can respond. And so we pray and we invite everyone to pray. Those of us in here and those of us out there, our churches and our church leaders, because we need prayer to bolster us, to give us hope and inspiration. And we need God to intervene to assist us. But in the interim, we are not just praying, we are also preparing. And I believe that that is what a prudent government ought to do. And this today meeting, peculiar as it is and unfortunate as it is that we had to come here last minute, so to speak, is part and parcel of that continued effort to prepare and to ensure that all the necessary tools, Mr. President, are available to us. We have not only stopped at the health preparation, we have been working through the Honorable Member for Nevis. Was it in 5? 3? I thought you reached 5 by now. Nevis 3. Forgive me. Nevis 3. And his team, who have been doing a stellar job in relation to our social services, in relation to counseling services for people who are distressed, in relation to assistance with food and other necessities. They have been helping and helping and helping some more. And I would want to commend them because we have been on radio giving out their numbers. And I'm told that people are calling at all hours of day and night. And they have not complained. And I want to go on record to commend the staff, minister, his permanent secretary, and his entire team in social services for what they've been doing. In education, the Honorable Junior Minister, the Honorable Troy Liburd, and his team have been working assiduously with their counterparts on SINKITs. We recognize that Monday, students should be going back to school. But the schools are closed. We can't, in this environment, send our children back to school because schools, by their nature, are large gatherings of persons. And so, we have ensured that when they went off a week early for their Easter break, that they had study packs to take with them, all students. At the primary and secondary level, I'm advised, had the necessary study packs, revision kits to take with them. And we have been speaking with Flow for a program called Flow Study that I'm told will provide now an online platform. And so even as we meet virtually from time to time, the Cabinet has been using technology to stay in touch with each other, to discuss issues. That virtual setup will now extend to our education. What I would like to go on record today to say is that our children will not suffer in terms of any reduction in the quality of their education because of this. We will deploy all that we can deploy to ensure that our children continue to benefit from their education. And that includes, Mr. President, securing the necessary devices for those children having done the survey, for those homes that do not have, to provide those devices to those homes. And in addition, paying for internet service to those homes that do not currently have service so that those children can benefit. They say it's an all-of-society approach that is required, and we are doing what we must to ensure that the least level of disruption to the lives of our people is encountered. In agriculture, we have done, again, a tremendous job. As the minute we heard about this threat, the Deputy Premier and Honourable Member for Nevis, 4, jumped into action. And he and his team, Mr. President, have done a marvelous job in terms of preparing us for what we are terming greater food security on the island of Nevis. We have given out seeds, to what we are calling backyard farmers. We have given out seedlings to registered farmers. We've provided fertilizer. We've provided labor. We've provided free plowing. We've provided free water for the next 6 months. We have waived most of the fees at our abattoir. To our fishers, we've provided free fish pot wire and 50% discount on any additional rolls that they may buy. First roll free, 50% discount on any additional rolls. We have been trying our very best to make food available, locally grown, locally produced, and we know that the local food is the best food for us. We are supporting our farmers, and I've said so elsewhere, and I say so here now, that if there's one lesson that Nevis must take away from COVID-19, is that never again must our food supply be dependent on tropical coming in. Never again must our food supply be dependent on tropical coming in. We have land, we must start to plant. And the government must reorient its thinking to ensure that agriculture now takes pride of place in our island. We must feed ourselves, Mr. President, and that is what we are seeking to do. And these incentives that we have offered, I believe the farmers have responded, I'm told, very positively. And that more food is already in the ground. And because we have emphasized short-term crops, the hope would be that in the next several weeks that we'll be seeing the benefit of that vision and that more food will be available. And I'm just begging the public that when the food becomes available, buy the food. Some of us like to buy tomatoes from Miami instead of the local tomatoes. Buy the food. And I'm being reminded to say to the vendors to sell at a reasonable price. Because if the government is giving the farmers all these things for free, then we are hopeful that the farmers and the vendors would also see that we're in this together and offer a little discount on the price to allow our people to be able to eat. And so, Mr. President, I'm sorry, Mr. President. Mr. President, these are some of the efforts. The honorable member for Nevis, 1. Trying to get it right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The honorable member for Nevis, 1. He has led the team there at the Labor Department. And I know, and I would want to go on record to thank him and the team, because they have been under tremendous pressure, getting everything ready for the relief, the Social Security relief in particular. There's $1,000 that is being offered to persons who have lost their jobs or have had a reduced income. They will, of course, get topped up to $1,000. And so his team has been working to ensure that the necessary forms are completed and completed properly stamped and written up, that they get to Social Security. And we have been checking, and I'm advised that the process has been going very well. Up to yesterday, I'm advised that the head of our Labor Department here, Mr. Gary Leiber, that he and his team were engaged up to yesterday to ensure that come Monday, those checks from Social Security will start to hit people's accounts. We understand that there's been a bit of a delay, but the reality has been that these things take time. And since not everybody is qualified, you had to ensure that those who are supposed to benefit. And so those checks, for those out there who are waiting, should hit people's accounts on Monday. And that is part of the relief. And I'm told that the 20th of every month for the next 3 months, persons should get the benefit of that $1,000 relief. Now, I want to emphasize that that is not the only relief. I mentioned social services, the $500 per month poverty alleviation, the alleviation on water, the payment of water for many, the alleviation that we have given at Nevis on the payment of electricity for many, the constant efforts that we have made to stimulate agriculture, tax relief for small businesses. We have put all that package together to say that we are seeking to do the best that we can, Mr. President, to respond to an unprecedented threat. Something that you, nor I, nor anyone in this room has ever seen before. And the unprecedented nature of the threat means that there is no playbook. There is no encyclopedia that we can take from the shelf and say, when COVID comes, this is the way you respond. So some people have sought to highlight the mistakes that have been made. Well, the last time I checked, I was only human. Last time I checked, the Prime Minister was only human. The last time I checked the good Bible, that God created who? Adam was a perfect man. And Jesus was a perfect man. I believe since those two, we have not seen any perfect human being created, Mr. President. I say that because I need to make the point that the nature of man is such that when we deal with unprecedented situations as we're dealing with this risk now, we must recognize that we continually have to adjust. You saw it in the shopping, Mr. President. One day you tried something that didn't quite work, then you try a zone. Some say it worked, some say it didn't work. The police had to get involved. But every day, we are tweaking, we are adjusting, we're trying to get it right. And that's because there is no manual. So we have to continually be agile. And again, that is why we have the benefit of the state of emergency, to allow us the legal room to maneuver. So when we can tell people, stay off the road, stay in your homes, we have a legal underpinning for it. And we could not run the risk that that underpinning is secured on St. Christopher. But on Nevis, because of 1904, the argument is made that it doesn't any longer apply to Nevis. And so that's why we're here today. Mr. President, I promised my team I wouldn't be long. But since I don't anticipate that there will be other speakers on my side, I will just add that no praise is too much for those who have been out helping. I think that this challenge has brought out in most of us the very best of the Nevisian spirit. And many people have gone above and beyond. We have a gentleman, and I shall mention him because of his generosity, Mr. Ernest Amory on St. Kitts of Amory Enterprises. Their main business, as I understand it, is a bakery. And Mr. Amory called me, and Mr. Amory said, Mr. Premier, I am giving away free bread in St. Kitts. And I want to extend that to Nevis as well. Now bear in mind that as far as I know, Amory Enterprises doesn't have any bakery on Nevis. That's why I want to emphasize him more so. And so he could have, like others said, I don't make no money up there. So let the bakery them up there fend with that. But no, he said that he wanted to extend it. And we asked the Deputy Premier, an honorable member for Nevis, 2, 3, 4. Look like you want to be a member for all the districts. 4, to engage. We asked him to engage and to manage the process. And thus far I'm advised that the entire parish of St. George and St. John's, that they have been taken care of. And that on Monday and Tuesday, the anticipation is that St. Paul's, St. Thomas's, and St. James will be taken care of. And I want to thank Mr. Amory for his partnership with the government for making this happen. But I also want to thank the volunteers, because people came forward to volunteer, to assist, to hand out, distribute the bread. Some may say, oh, it's only bread. I understand that. In fact, sometimes maybe you deliver the bread, a man asks you where the cheese. But the thinking behind it, the generosity of spirit, I believe that that is an indication of the very best in us, Mr. President. Mr. Amory is not alone. A number of others have stepped forward. Hosfords donated some $10,000 worth of groceries that were distributed again through social services. Other individuals on a daily basis are providing meals. I was over at the EOC yesterday, I never see more pizza. Boxes and boxes of pizza delivered. And I would be here all day if I had to list the people who have been providing their services, their money, their worth, whatever they have. This has been classic all of society approach. And I would want to commend all who have been engaged. Mr. President, we think about the people in finance. Normally people are concerned, they say, inland revenue, and they're only concerned about collecting tax. Well, you know what? They have been out working too, you know. And just yesterday, I was pleased that because of their hard work, including during times when we have lockdown, they've done so with special permission from the Commissioner of Police, that all of our public servants are going to be paid on Monday instead of next Friday. And so we have brought it forward because we understand, Mr. President, most people not working, you know, they're home. But we understand the financial pressure that this COVID-19 has brought. And so we have decided to bring forward our payday to Monday of next week, as opposed to Friday when it was originally scheduled, to ensure that our people have something in their pockets to go about doing what they had to do. And Monday was a good date because it coincides with the date that the Social Security checks are going to become available. Just yesterday, I was also able to send over from St. Kitts, and I want to thank the Honorable Troy Liebert, because he arranged a boat quickly to get the checks for the poverty alleviation program that came over yesterday. That program, as we know, is a federal program. The checks were delivered to me because there was, of course, no transportation. And we were able to arrange, at short notice, those checks to come over. So those persons and households benefiting from that, they can be assured that they will get their money. The people who are on step, we've also ensured that they're getting their little money. So the reality is that department after department, ministry after ministry, all have been playing their role. And we have come today to say that the fight is not yet over. We cannot, in good conscience, stand up today and say, oh, we only have 4 cases in Nevis, so let's go back to normal. Because even in China, we're now hearing, Mr. President, that when they were declaring victory, they are now warning about a second wave of infections, which they say has come now from Chinese coming back to China from places like Russia and elsewhere, and bringing infection with them. So we have to be mindful that we are not yet out of the woods. And we have to be sure through testing, through treatment, isolation, quarantine, social distancing, washing our hands with soap and water, masking when we go out in public, all of these things. We have to ensure that the gains that we have made, we don't lose them by becoming overconfident, by declaring victory. So we are here to have the necessary framework, Mr. President, of the state of emergency to allow us to continue the fight. Now, because we are seeking to be ad idem, at one, with the island of St. Kitts, our sister island, and with what has been done at the National Assembly, we would need to make some minor adjustments to the resolution. And on page 2, or the back page of the resolution, where it says, and whereas, Mr. President, the COVID-19 virus continues to pose a significant threat of a natural calamity on the scale of a public health emergency, to the Federation of St. Christopher Nevis, and it is therefore necessary to extend the state of emergency up to a period of 6 months instead of 12 months. And then we also want to make the change that where it says, now therefore, be it resolved that the Nevis Island Assembly hereby approves the position adopted by the National Assembly instead of the Federal Parliament National Assembly on 17 April 2020 that it is necessary to extend the state of emergency up to a period of 6 months or such shorter period as may be specified to take effect from today, being the 18th day of April 2020. And so for completeness, Mr. President, the resolution number 2 of 2020 says, whereas by virtue of the provisions of section 19(1) of the St. Christopher and Nevis 1983 Constitution Order, the Governor General may by proclamation declare that a state of emergency exists in St. Christopher and Nevis for the purposes of Chapter 2 of the Constitution. And whereas by virtue of proclamation number 6 of 2020, dated 28th March 2020, the Governor General declared a state of emergency for St. Christopher and Nevis for the period 28th March 2020 until 11th April 2020 on the basis of the threat of a natural calamity of the COVID-19 virus, an infectious disease on a pandemic scale that has threatened the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis. And whereas the said state of emergency was extended until Saturday, 18th April 2020, by proclamation number 11 of 2020, dated the 7th day of April 2020, and whereas section 19(4) of the St. Christopher and Nevis Constitution, 1983 Order, provides that a declaration of emergency existing in a part of St. Christopher and Nevis, and including all of the island of Nevis, shall lapse at the expiration of a period of 21 days, beginning with the date of publication of the declaration. And whereas pursuant to section 19(7) of the St. Christopher and Nevis 1983 Constitution Order, a resolution of the Nevis Island Assembly passed for the purpose therein shall remain in force for 12 months or such shorter period as may be specified therein. And whereas pursuant to section 19(8) of the St. Christopher and Nevis 1983 Constitution Order, a resolution of the Nevis Island Assembly for the purposes of subsection 4 shall not be passed in the Assembly unless it is supported by the votes of not less than 2/3 of all the representatives. And whereas the COVID-19 virus continues to pose a significant threat of a natural calamity on the scale of a public health emergency to the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis, and it is therefore necessary to extend the state of emergency up to a period of 6 months or such shorter period as may be specified. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Nevis Island Assembly hereby approves the position adopted by the National Assembly on 17th April 2020, that it is necessary to extend the state of emergency up to a period of 6 months or such shorter period as may be specified, to take effect from the 18th day of April 2020 to combat the threat of the COVID-19 virus to the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis. Approved by the Nevis Island Assembly, this, we hope, 18th day of April 2020. I read that for the benefit of the record and end by simply reiterating that the reason we are here today is to ensure that there is no argument that the state of emergency would have lapsed in relation to the island of Nevis, and that because the constitutional provisions appear to have some level of ambiguity, we have decided at very short notice that it was better to be safe than sorry, and that we would convene the House and seek the imprimatur of this House to approve the resolution to continue the state of emergency on the island of Nevis on the same terms as it has been continued on our sister island of St. Kitts. With those few words, Mr. President, I wish this resolution safe passage.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion of the resolution before this honorable House and also reserve the right to speak if necessary.
to give my response to the resolution just debated by the Honorable Premier. But before doing so, Mr. President, and I am very mindful of the time, I do crave your indulgence to permit me to just say a few brief words to express my profound gratitude to persons who have been instrumental or who were instrumental in ensuring my safe journey to stand in this honorable house today. Mr. President, it is indeed an honor for me to stand before you today and to set my footing in this honorable house. As a child, Mr. President, this was perhaps a dream of mine that I perhaps did not foresee in this near future. I did anticipate, Mr. President, that perhaps this dream might have come true at some point when I was perhaps in my mid-40s. But it is indeed a pleasure for me to stand here, just being the mere age of 37, and perhaps being the youngest member of this honorable parliament. And also, Mr. President, it is also indeed an honor for me to stand here, also being a female, and I am very pleased to join with the member, the nominated member, Honorable Hazel Brandy Williams. I wish to take this opportunity to thank God Almighty for giving me the guidance, the strength, and the wisdom to be able to successfully embark on this journey. I also wish to thank my predecessor, the Honorable Joseph Parry, for laying the footpath for me to be able to follow into his footsteps. I thank my family, my immediate family, my husband and my son, who are present here today, as well as my father and my two siblings, who were able to grace us with their presence this morning. Mr. President, all being that the notice for this morning's sitting was very short indeed, I do wish to state for the record, Mr. President, that I do hope that this is a one-off instance, and taking into consideration the state of emergency, I do concur that the urgency was perhaps somewhat justifiable. However, I do wish to say, Mr. President, that I hope, this being my first time, that this is not a continuation, a practice, or a habit of any such nature, and that in future adequate notice of at least 24 hours or 48 hours would be given. I'm not sure of the exact notice period, but I do sincerely hope that we would adhere to the notice period, Mr. President. Now, as I move to give my response to the resolution, I too myself, as indicated by the Honorable Premier, was at a loss as to why we had to come to the House today to really debate or pass this resolution, as I am very mindful, Mr. President, that a similar resolution was passed in the National Assembly yesterday. Now, having taken into consideration the justifications for the resolution, I perhaps sincerely understand why the resolution had to be passed. Mr. President, we would have had the benefit of foresight. The COVID-19 pandemic, really, we were able, along with the rest of the world, to really see its catastrophic effects, having been introduced in Wuhan, China, sometime back in December 2019, and looking at its effects there through January 2019. Mr. President, it is my respectful contention that perhaps greater initiative could have been taken and greater measures could have been taken by us here in St. Kitts and Nevis in order to somewhat alleviate or reduce the impact, the present impact that we are now facing of COVID-19, because we had the benefit of foresight. We were able to look and to see the impact of COVID-19 on other countries. It is my respectful submission, Mr. President, that we perhaps reacted a little bit too slow in terms of not properly closing our borders on time, and so therefore it is almost as if the government sat back and waited until we had confirmed cases in order to react. And so therefore the measures of the government were somewhat reactionary rather than being precautionary or proactive. Mr. President, in light of that, I do sincerely understand the need and the measures taken by the government to ensure that we are able to reduce, to some extent, the impact of this COVID-19 pandemic on our shores, particularly us here in Nevis. And so therefore, I am indeed very grateful that the government has taken some initiative, although I do believe that they can do more, some initiative to ensure that we take protective measures to safeguard against the impact. However, Mr. President, it is my respectful view that the state of emergency, or the extension of the state of emergency for some 6-month period is somewhat a very drastic measure at this time, considering the fact that we have 14 cases at hand, 4 cases in Nevis, and so perhaps it would have been more beneficial to us here in Nevis to somewhat give a shorter period of about 48 days to see the impact and for us to make a determination as to whether we are able to flatten the curve. Without that evidence before us, Mr. Speaker, I sincerely hope that we are not perhaps overreacting to the impact of this COVID-19 pandemic on our shores. And I say that with caution, Mr. President. I am not making any justification or advocating that we sit back idly and wait until something happens and then react. I am simply saying that perhaps 6 months is a very long time in order for us to be under a state of emergency, and it does not necessarily afford us the opportunity to really monitor the situation at hand. Now, Mr. President, I am also very mindful of not just the health impact of COVID-19, the social impact, but more so the economic impact of COVID-19 on the Nevian society. It has not been easy, Mr. President. When we look at our own unique situation here in Nevis, I think the first state of emergency was perhaps issued around the last week in March, somewhere around the 28th of March. And so, today's date being the 18th of April 2020, we can say that the country has been under a state of emergency for almost a month. 21 days, yes, correct, almost a month. Now, Mr. Speaker, during that period, it has been a very challenged 21 days for some, if not most Nevians. And so, I ask the government to take into consideration the economic impact of COVID-19 on most Nevision households. For example, Mr. President, to date, we have heard from since the end of March that there have been a relief package by Social Security to give some sort of alleviation or relief to persons who have been laid off as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. President, some 21 days later, and not even one check have been issued by Social Security to sort of ease the burden or the financial pressure, the financial hardship of many Nevisians. Every time there is a lockdown, 24-hour lockdown, and after the release of same, we notice that the supermarkets are filled. We can see a number of Nevisians lining up, extensive long lines of persons trying to get supplies within the supermarkets. Mr. President, we see continuous spending. People are spending, they need food, and therefore they're going to the supermarkets to buy food. But one have to wonder, Mr. President, as to without having the ability to earn an income or without any earnings coming in, how are those persons really able to be in the supermarkets every day to buy food in order to feed their children? Mr. President, that cannot be easy. It cannot be easy for persons. And so, perhaps, had we had the benefit of methodological planning without so much bureaucracy in terms of having to fill out the necessary forms, the necessary going to the Labor Department in order to get Social Security aid, had the relief been more accessible, Mr. President, I do believe that persons within the Nevision society would have feel the ease of the burden, the ease of the hardship in terms of being able to provide for their families. And so I ask the honorable members of this parliament that whilst it is well and good to come into this house and to say that we have been doing so and we have implemented XYZ measure, I am simply asking the honorable members of this house, Mr. President, to, when they come to Parliament, to come with a finite plan with tables, tablelines, timelines, with specific instructions to give guidance to the people of Nevis. All we have been hearing for the past couple weeks is that you're going to get relief from Social Security. I do note the Honorable Premier's submission that he indicated that the relief checks would be presented to persons on Monday. I do hope that we are able to stick to that timetable. But, Mr. President, what concerns me really is what is the stimulus or the relief package for those persons who we know would not necessarily qualify for a Social Security benefit? For example, those self-employed persons such as bus drivers, fishermen, or persons just in line who have not been making their Social Security contributions. What measure, what package is in place, what relief package or initiative is in place to ensure that the hardship, the financial hardship, is somewhat eased for them? I have not heard that demonstrated, debated here today, Mr. President. What I have heard is that there are a number of initiatives, a number of incentives, but what specifically are they? People in this situation of panic, in this time of hardship, people simply want to know, where can we go to get the relief? How soon can we expect the relief? And further, how long are we going to be in this state of economic hardship? Mr. President, I take the opportunity to remind you and also the members of the House that for some time now, some years now, Nevis has been suffering from an economic plight. The economic activity in Nevis really has been on a downward spiral for some time. And so therefore, Mr. President, I do sincerely ask this, that the COVID-19 pandemic has somewhat worsened the impact of the economy, simply because a number of business places had to close down. We know the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the tourism sector. It is totally non-existent. And so therefore, Mr. President, I do ask the government, I was really of the respectful view that we were coming to the House today to really discuss a fine-tuned bill that would outline some sort of relief for the economic hardship that members of the Nevision society has been facing. Yes, Mr. President, I am mindful of the time, but I do ask you to please permit me to make my presentation, because I am speaking not only for myself, not only for my party, but for the mass majority of the Nevision public. People really need to know they are feeling the economic hardship. As it relates to long-term planning,
Okay, I noticed that you have been trending on outside. I allow you to go through because it's your first, but if you were to, I would advise you to stick to the resolution at hand, because you're talking about the incentives that people ought to get and so on. That is a different matter for a different day. But today is the resolution that we are dealing with, and I would want you to stick to the resolution.
Mr. President, very grateful for your guidance, but indeed, if I may respectfully say, Mr. President, that the impact of COVID-19 also plays a significant role to the resolution before me. How can we in the House debate a resolution to extend the state of emergency, which is what the resolution basically is about, without debating the impact of that state of emergency? And Mr. President, I am simply saying that in taking all of the submissions into consideration, we do have to look at the impact, the economic impact, or the adverse effects of COVID-19 on the Nevision society, not just from a health perspective, not just in terms of safeguarding and protecting Nevisions, but also looking at the adverse effects that COVID-19 is having on the economy. When we have a state of emergency and a lockdown, Mr. President, if I may dare say, and I do hope that the members of this House, perhaps it is not affecting them economically as much as, those Nevision of lower income or those persons who have lost their income. But nevertheless, Mr. President, it is indeed pertinent to this resolution, because if we are coming here to ask for an extension for 6 months, we surely have to look at whether that is in the best interest of all stakeholders, not just the members of this honorable House, but also the Nevision society. And so I do have to advocate for them, because these, Mr. President, are the challenges that we face. These are the phone calls, the questions that I get daily. And so I have to advocate based on the people, the common people, the people who feels it. It says, Mr. President, who feels it knows it. And so whilst all of the members here, not including myself, can definitely guarantee once they leave here today, they are sure of a salary, a substantial salary. Not many Nevisions are in the same position. And so we do have a sense of hysteria, anxiety. People are wondering, how are we able to cope? How are we going to cope? What would happen after 6 months? How long are we going to stay in this economic plight for? And so these are things that the resolution, even though not written here on paper, these are the things that are between the lines that must be debated in this honorable house. And so I do say, Mr. President, that whilst I must say I take the government initiative, I am simply asking them to take into consideration that in order to alleviate the anxiety, the hardship, that when we come to present resolutions in Parliament, we have to look at the overall impact, and we have to be able to be in a position to give people specific and clear goals and objectives. And so, Mr. President, I did indicate that I would not keep you. I would not keep the House any further. But I must say that the measures put forward by the government, that they need to be fine-tuned. They need to be fine-tuned, and I ask them to please take that into consideration. They need to be fine-tuned so that they could give people some sort of clear relief. People have many questions as to when school is going to open. Persons like me who own a small business, I have inherent fear of hardship as to whether I would be able to continue to have the doors of my law firm open so that I could continue to provide employment for my staff. These are the realities that people are facing, Mr. President. So I dare say, in response to the resolution before me, I note that the honorable member is seeking, in line with the resolution passed yesterday in the National House of Assembly, for a 6 months extension of the state of emergency. But I am simply asking on what basis? And whilst we are doing so in one spectrum, on the other spectrum, the government has not brought anything to the table to tell the people, the good people of Nevis, how they intend to alleviate the hardships. And so we have heard that there will be an issuance of the Social Security checks on Monday, but what happened thereafter? What should people look to next month? When will be the issuance of the next Social Security check? What are the initiatives for those people who do not qualify for Social Security? Where do they find their outlet? Mr. President, I am sure that all of us here in this honorable house, we have looked at the initiative brought on by the Nevis Reformation Party to assist persons in filling out the Social Security Relief Form. And, Mr. President, when I look at the number of persons who partake in that initiative, it is genuinely telling me that people are literally suffering in this country. And we cannot overlook that. The members of this honorable house are to take this into consideration and take a more practical and sensitive approach to this COVID-19 pandemic. It is not okay for us to say that we are going to extend the state of emergency. Whilst that is a good initiative, and do not get me wrong, whilst that is a good initiative, my argument, my respectful submission is whether or not it warrants such a lengthy extension. Wouldn't it have been better for us to give a shorter extension to monitor the situation on hand, to look at the number of cases coming before us, to see whether we have reached the point where we are able to flatten the curve, and then, Mr. President, we can make the necessary case for an extension of the state of emergency. I am simply saying, Mr. President, it is my respectful submission that the 6 months period, whether it was passed in the National Assembly or not, it is just my respectful submission that it is perhaps too long in this case. Mr. President, if you may permit me an additional 2 minutes just to wrap up, I must say that, I take this opportunity to employ and to encourage the members of this Honorable House to take this period of COVID-19 with some sort of sensitivity. COVID-19, the virus, coronavirus, it has no blinders, Mr. President. It can affect any one of us. It does not single out, it does not discriminate. We have looked at the international news. We know what the persons in the UK are experiencing, the persons in New York, even those in China, France, Italy. We see the impact. People are dying. That is the reality. But also, we have to look at the second side of the coin. We are looking at one side, but we also have to look at the economic impact of COVID-19, because the reality is COVID-19 is an immune virus. It attacks the immune system. So it is more likely to impact persons with weaker immune system. And Mr. President, if it is that our people are unable to feed themselves, to feed their children, if they are unable to buy the necessary foods, which we know are very expensive, in order to boost their immune system, what would happen is that COVID-19 would have a greater impact on our people. And so therefore we have to put the necessary measures in place. We have to look at this from a more constructive and a more concrete perspective. Mr. President, the truth is, many of us here in Nevis, and more so Nevis, I find that the government has really been lax in terms of its initiative of dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. There are more that we can do, but as a people we need to unite. There has been no or little involvement of the opposition side. This is the time, and I really employ to the honorable members of this House that we all have to collectively put politics aside now, and we have to work together to see how best we can get our little Nevis, only 36 square miles, through this pandemic. We have to work together. We have to come up with ideas. And so I do employ, I do encourage, I ask the members of this honorable House to let us take this initiative with a more human and dignified approach so that we can ensure that we are able to work together to alleviate the hardships for our Nevision people. Mr. President, that is the extent of my respectful submission. I do take this opportunity to wish yourself and the other honorable members of this House a very safe journey. I employ to them, as well as the Nevision public, to ensure that they take heed or adhere to the precautionary measures issued by the healthcare professionals. I ask them to continue to practice social distancing, and I do ask them at this very time to please ensure that they be their brother's keeper. If it is that you can offer assistance to anybody within your community, whether they are your supporters or not, I ask them to take the initiative, because this COVID-19 pandemic is going to change the way we do things, or has been changing the way we do things here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And very soon, we are going to see a state of new normal. I thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I rise to lend my support to my colleague and move of this resolution that is before this honorable House. But before I make comments along those lines, let me, first of all, welcome and congratulate the member opposite who would have been sworn in this morning, and congratulate her on winning an election some days ago. I can't recall how long it was, but I know it was back on, I believe it was the 8th of March. 8th of March? The 5th of March, yeah. Okay, good, thanks. And we have sworn her in here this morning in this honorable house, and as I said before, I want to congratulate her. If I may quickly just say, though, that in congratulating her, I would also want to indicate to her that she is the beneficiary of what I can safely say is a democratic process that was at work, continue to be at work, and we as a party, the CCM party, this proud party, have always sought to ensure that we adhere to the democratic process here on the island of Nevis. If I throw my mind back to 2011 when I was sworn in here first of all, in October of 2011, we understood the circumstances then. We as a party felt that our democracy was being trampled upon and was trampled upon. And we were vindicated in our thoughts and our thinking then, after not just one judge, but at least 3 appeal judges felt that we were right in saying that our democracy was trampled upon when persons were not allowed to vote in this island. Born and raised, live here, duly registered. But I don't want to go down that road, but I just want to say that she is the beneficiary of a great party that have sought to adhere to the democratic process of the island of Nevis. And I believe we should be congratulated for that, not necessarily because we're doing it, because we must, and we continue to do so. But I say kudos to all who would have ensured that we uphold those democratic processes. So congratulations and welcome, member opposite, and I wish you well in this house. Mr. President, I want to move on to congratulate all of the frontline workers who would have put their life and effort on the line so as to ensure that we are safe in the island of Nevis amidst the difficulties that we are facing, that is of COVID-19. Now, I want to congratulate all of the doctors, nurses, emergency personnel, persons who are manning the emergency operating center 24 hours. You'd have heard the mover and Premier would have mentioned that earlier. And all of the business places and well-wishers of the island of Nevis who would have galvanized their effort to ensure that we see ourselves through this difficult and challenging times. Mr. President, I'll say from here at this very rostrum that as difficult as it may seem now, I do believe that more challenges lie ahead. And that is why I do believe that we need to be united in this effort to overcome this challenge. Divided, I believe we'll fail, but united, I believe we'll sail. Sail through the rough seas ahead of us, sail through the challenging times, and at the end of it, we are hoping that we'll be sailing some calmer waters. And at the end of it all, because we do believe that some lessons are being taught to us. We are learning as we go along. Things are changing every day. And with the fluid nature of this process and the dynamics that we have to face, then of course we are learning. And through this learning process, I believe we'll come out at the end of it all a much better community, a much better island, a stronger island or federation, if I want to put it that way. But Mr. President, we are here to debate and approve this resolution. But while we are doing so, we understand why it has to be done. Sometimes persons are left up to using their own consciences, and persons are told to do the right thing, and sometimes they don't. But the law is there, or the regulations are there to guide a certain process. And all over the world, you hear about lockdown in Britain, lockdown in Europe, all over Europe, lockdown in the Caribbean. They're locked down. There are certain measures that have been implemented to ensure that persons or citizens are protected in these difficult times. Now, I don't expect us to come here and debate, all of us debate for an entire day over something that I believe is purely academical, because there are reasons for it. There are reasons for us to have this particular resolution, and there are reasons for us to have the necessary emergency situation in place so that we can ensure that our valuable resource, the human resource of this island and of this federation, is protected. We need all of our able body to be available to us once we would have gone through these challenges. And that is why this is so academic. There's no need for any rancor. There's no need for any argument over this particular resolution. It is as basic can be. We say we are here to approve a position that was adopted yesterday, Friday the 17th of April 2020 in the Federal or the National Assembly. And that's what we're here. And as the mover would have said, we're erring on the side of caution to make sure that there are no challenges. And when it's all said and done, we would have done the right thing to ensure that anyone who sits down and start to think about challenging the process, Nevis would have done what they had to do. So the island of Nevis is in concordance or consistent with what is required of it under the law and within the confines of the Constitution. I'm not going to debate all sections of the Constitution. Those who are presented to us during the initial presentation of the resolution. I am no lawyer, but I'll tell you this much. I am all for the protection of the people of Nevis. I am all for the protection of the people of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And I am all for what is right and what is good to ensure that we are in good standing as a community and adhering to the laws of this island or this federation as well. Mr. President, I do believe in my firm conviction that when we had those Category 5 hurricanes back in 2017, we heard a lot of new quotations or slangs being used. This is a new norm. This is something new that we're dealing with, Category 5 hurricanes, and moving forward we'll be seeing more of them. Well, I also have been hearing all kinds of things being said about the current state of affairs, that this is the new norm, this is the new not so normal, and a new way of things going forward. Of course it's a new not so normal, because we are here with some masks on. This is not normal. And of course we're here on a Saturday morning. That is not so normal either, because we have never done it before. And there are a lot of things that will evolve as we go along. A lot of new things will have to be adhered to and adopted as we go along. So we are what we call now in a state of a new, not so normal state of affairs. And that is why I stand here this morning to lend my support to this resolution, because of the new, not so normal state of affairs that we are facing. Then of course we have to do things differently. I'm not going to go into all of these forms that were filled out by for Social Security and all of the necessary things. We have been putting it out there as to how persons can access the necessary support and help that is available through the government services. The Minister of Labor, the Premier or the mover would have spoken about him and his effort. He would have spoken about the minister responsible for education, the minister responsible for social affairs, and the minister responsible for health. He has gone through all that, so I'm not going to repeat all that. But I want to say to the Nevisian community that this party in government, your concerned citizens movement in government, have been doing an excellent job thus far. And while I'm at that, let me commend the mover of the resolution and the leader of the island of Nevis, the Premier. I want to say to the entire Nevisian public and the entire world, of course, that the Premier currently is facing a situation that has never, ever existed on the island of Nevis. We have never had a shutdown in my lifetime, and I'm 51 years old, and I'm proud to say that. I've never had a situation where the entire island has been shut down because of a pandemic. Persons may be alive to talk about what may have happened in 1939 to 45, the Second World War. I think that's the date, somewhere around there. Persons may be around to speak about that. I was not there. But this is a situation that Nevis or the Federation has never faced before. So, of course, there'll be new ways of doing things, new ways of operations. And as a result of that, I am saying to the mover of the resolution and the Premier of the island of Nevis, this will be a defining moment in the history of this island with you as the leader of the Premier of the island of Nevis. You have done a wonderful job so far. And I stand here and say that, and I mean it. I mean it because the true mettle of a man would be known and seen and experienced once he's put to the test. And the test is right here before us. And I want to commend you for going out there and bringing the information to the general public, bringing that calm voice, that soothing voice that has brought some level of hope to us here on the island of Nevis. So I want to commend you, and I do that publicly, Premier Brantley and mover of the resolution, and member for Nevis too. Nevis too you are. So, Mr. President, we'll hear more as we go. We'll have further House sitting as well, where we'll debate some more, but I didn't come here to talk for long. Because, of course, well, we are learning to cook a lot more now, you know, because we are locked down, so we have to cook. So I want to get home to cook soon. But let's say that's a little bit of humor. But, Mr. President, as I said before, this resolution is it's a simple process. We could have come here and spent 5 minutes and out of here. But, of course, we have stayed a little bit longer. So I want to lend my support to the mover of the resolution. And I want to say, in wrapping up to the entire Nevisian public, whole strain. Like they say, sometimes tighten your belt a little more, but also cut and contrive as you go. There are some lessons that we have to draw on from our forefathers, our grandmothers, and those who would have taught us well in those difficult times. Perhaps we would have gotten to a state in Nevis where things were so good that it is difficult to make a little adjustment, but I'm asking us to adjust accordingly, because there's some bumpy roads ahead. I said before, united, we are going to sail. We are going to sail together through those rough times ahead of us, and then come out on the other side in some calmer waters. So I want to wrap up by wishing this resolution smooth passage through this honorable House, and I want to end by saying, Mr. President, I want us all to stay safe, adhere to all of the necessary protocols out there, adhere to what the law requires of us. Once we do that, we'll end up in a much better situation after this whole process is said and done. So, Mr. President, with those few words, I want to wish this resolution safe passage through this honorable House. May it please you.
Mr. President, good afternoon, Mr. President. And good afternoon to the listeners and viewers of this very unusual sitting of Parliament. Mr. President, I rise to add my voice to the resolution number 2 of 2020 that deals with this unusual and unprecedented time here, not only in St. Kitts and Nevis, but throughout the world. But before I get into my very brief discourse, Mr. President, I want to congratulate the member opposite, first on her victory at the polls on March 5th, and also on being sworn in this morning as the member opposite. I want to say to you that I wish you Godspeed, and I hope that you would recognize that your calling here in this Parliament is a privilege, and it behooves of you not only to represent your constituency, but also the entire island of Nevis, and if I dare say, throughout the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and I wish you well. Mr. President, this is a Saturday afternoon, and while the mover of the resolution would have explained and gave the rationale as to why we are here, I believe that he is accurate in saying that it is better to err on the side of caution and it's better to be safe than sorry. And so we are here, Mr. President. This similar exercise took place yesterday at the federal level. And while we recognize that we here on the island of Nevis also have a constitutional duty and a constitutional mandate to ensure that we look after the people of Nevis, we felt that it was necessary to be here today. Mr. President, there's been a lot of chatter. That more could be done. Things were not done on time. We are late in whatever was done. There's a lot of chatter. Mr. President, there really isn't a manual or a roadmap for the times that we are in. And every single day, Mr. President, this cabinet, we converse, and every single day, the dynamics are different. The dynamics yesterday, Mr. President, would be different today than what it would be tomorrow. And I am happy and I'm privileged, Mr. President, to be a part of a cabinet of men and a distinguished lady who have a clear vision. There is no gray areas, Mr. President, in this. And I want to say, Mr. President, that when this is all over, when the dust is settled, when the island of Nevis and the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis would once again be open for business, the historians and the pundits would look and say whether or not the Premier did the right thing, and they would look and they would say whether or not the Minister of Health did the right thing. They would look and they would say whether the Prime Minister. But Mr. President, there is one focus in all of this. One focus. And that is to ensure that we look after the well-being of the citizens of Nevis and of St. Kitts. Everything else is secondary. And Mr. President, we may make missteps on this journey, just like everybody else is. There is no manuscript, there is no roadmap. And I want to use this opportunity, Mr. President, to commend our Minister of Health, the nominated lady, Mr. President, for her steadfastness, for her forthrightness in this process. And along with her team in the healthcare sector, Mr. President, they would have prepared and ensure that the island of Nevis continue to be a step ahead. And I want to congratulate her, Mr. President, for doing a yeoman job thus far throughout this pandemic, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have all of the frontline workers throughout this country. And every day we ask them to put on their mask, and put on their uniform, and put on their clothes, and go out to look after the interests of the people of Nevis. We have here in the assembly the person in charge of the police force on the island of Nevis. I want to commend him and his team for continuing to go beyond the call of duty every single day, Mr. President. And we are here to ensure, Mr. President, that they have the necessary tools and legislation to do their jobs to protect us, the people of Nevis. So I want to congratulate him and his entire team. Mr. President, we have those folks who continue to have long, long hours. Our disaster folks, our folks at the hospital, the orderly, the nurses, the maids, Mr. President, we have a team there at our Public Works Department that are assisting the Ministry of Health day in and day out to make sure certain things are in place. I want to congratulate them, Mr. President, and to say to them, this government and the people of Nevis will be eternally grateful for their service. Not service specifically to the government or to the cabinet, but to the island and to the people of Nevis. I want to say thanks to them, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have been charged with a critical ministry in this pandemic, Department of Water. And all of the science are saying, Mr. President, wash your hands. Wash your hands with soap and water. And Mr. President, I want to use this rostrum, this platform, to say to the manager and to the workers of our water department how thankful we are, how thankful the people of Nevis are for their yeoman service. Because every single day, morning, noon, and night, it is our aim, Mr. President, to try and make sure we keep the water running in this country. And I want to say thanks to them. Mr. President, this resolution is not, in my mind, a controversial resolution. It is, in my mind, a resolution that I feel continue to give some protection and safety to the people of Nevis. And, Mr. President, while the resolution speaks to 6 months as prescribed in the resolution, there is also another caveat in our Constitution where it also states that the Governor General can revoke the state of emergency at any time. I'm paraphrasing, Mr. President. So while we're here 6 months or up to a year, it could be, Mr. President, 2 weeks. It could be 2 months. But whatever the time frame is, Mr. President, it must be guided by science. It must be guided by the professionals who are on the front line giving the necessary guidance and advice to the policymakers. Mr. President, the leader of this government would have given out a number of telephone numbers last Wednesday on the radio. Mine was one of them, and I don't mind. But Mr. President, what I recognize that while there are many persons who are seeking assistance, and while, Mr. President, we have assisted untold persons to fill out these forms via telephone and online, I asked the good people, Mr. President, at our Labor Department yesterday, are they working, Mr. President, quietly, without any fanfare? They go there early at mornings and leave there late at nights to make sure that everything is all right for the people of Nevis. And I've been advised, Mr. President, that up to yesterday there were nearly under 2,000 persons who would have applied, Mr. President. These include part-time workers, full-time workers, self-employed, laid-off workers, and reduced hours workers, Mr. President. Nearly 2,000. And Mr. President, I recognize also that while many persons are dependent on their day-to-day job or weekly job, that I want to suggest to them, Mr. President, that they should be as conservative as possible. Because while we hear, Mr. President, the figure of $1,000, I want to make it clear that not everyone will receive the amount of $1,000. Mr. President, I've also been advised that there are still an additional 300 applicants that still need to be processed. And those were received at the Labor Department via email, Mr. President. It talked that the Social Security should have already made payment. Mr. President, it's a process. And while we believe that persons ought to have probably access to cash as quickly and as easily as possible, Mr. President, I want to make sure that those persons who are applying for the assistance, that they are doing so properly. And I am certain that the Social Security as well are seeking to ensure that everything that they put in place is to make sure it's done properly and in order. And as a result, Mr. President, their checks will be paid or deposited into persons' account come Monday. I agree with the member on the other side. I would hope that it is done on Monday. It is not a process that the government has a control over. It's a Social Security initiative, and they have taken every step to make sure that it is done when they said that it would be done. And Mr. President, the aim is that on every 20th of every month, around that time frame, that payments will be made. So while there is a concern that persons may not be aware as to when the next check will be paid, I want to suggest to them that the aim is to pay around the 20th of every month. Mr. President, I believe that the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis sought to, at every step, stay in front of this pandemic. And there would be different views, and rightfully so. I believe that the Minister of Health, that if she comes to speak here this morning, that she would tell you, Mr. President, that at every step of the way, they try to stay ahead of this pandemic here in St. Kitts and Nevis, with a single focus, Mr. President, to protect and to safeguard our people. So, Mr. President, this resolution, in my mind, is another effort to stay ahead of this pandemic by ensuring that we continue to protect our population. And while we do so, Mr. President, we will continue to make every effort to give incentive to the general public. And one would argue whether the incentive is enough. One would argue whether more can't be done. And Mr. President, while we have that argument, I think we all can agree, of course, yes, more can be done. The incentive can be greater. Well, Mr. President, as I said before, every single day, every hour, every minute, the dynamics keep changing. And it takes focused leadership, steady leadership, and a vision for the future to ensure that we stay on track, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, with those few words, I want to wish this resolution safe passage to this Honorable House, and I want to encourage our people not to pay too much attention to fake news. And I'm going to use that language, Mr. President. Please, for your own sake, get your information from the relevant authority. Every single day, Mr. President, I think it was just yesterday I sent something to the Minister of Education. Yesterday or this morning. Yesterday, the days are flying so fast. Fake news. And you know what it said, Mr. President? It said, and it came from a teacher. A teacher. It said, she is understanding that teachers' salary would be cut. And Mr. President, I'm in Parliament. I'm in Parliament. And sometimes it takes a lot to get me upset, Mr. President. But I was furious, Mr. President. This is a teacher who sent me this note that she understands. I sent it to the Minister of Education and I said, well, this sounds like, what did I say, foolishness to me? Something to that effect. And Mr. President, I want to say to our people in this country, please, 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 get your information from an authoritative source and stop listening to fake news and propaganda in this country. It is not helping the situation and it is not creating the kind of environment that we want to fight this pandemic, Mr. President. It is a distraction. It gets people upset. It sends people pressure. When a teacher is going to send to you, understand that their salary will be cut. I say, what foolishness is this? Fake news. And we get them every day, Mr. President, every day. And I want to appeal, Mr. President, to our people who are engaged in this kind of activity to cease and desist from it. It is not helping. It is not. Mr. President, with those few words, Mr. President, I want to encourage our people to continue to be safe, continue to respect the instructions of the healthcare professionals in this country. Continue to respect, Mr. President, the guidance of our police and our security forces. And continue to hold strain, because I believe that there is a brighter light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you, Mr. President, and may it please you.
Mr. President, I rise in support of the resolution in front of the House, before the House today. And if I might appear a little drowsy, it is Saturday. It is lockdown, and we have a brilliant sunshine on the outside. I want to start that way because we need to bring some hope to the people of Nevis, to the people of the Federation, and I dare say to the people of the world. Because COVID-19 is a global pandemic. It touches all, the entire world. St. Kitts Nevis is not spared. And so we are here under not normal circumstances, but we are here because what we are here to do is important and is necessary if we are to keep our people protected. Before I go on, Mr. Speaker, I also would like to join with my other colleagues in bringing some congratulatory remarks and words to the Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons, who was newly sworn in this morning. I would have congratulated her in the past via social media, but I wanted for it to be recorded from this honorable House, from one woman to another. It is obvious that we sit on opposite sides, but it has been my mantra and it has been my mandate to see more women coming into politics, into elective politics. And I want to applaud you for this very important step that you would have taken and to congratulate you wholeheartedly on this very important step. I do welcome you into the halls of Parliament, and I want to remind you that the issues that you will have to deal with, you must always remember that women stand behind, or women are more at risk when it comes to socioeconomic issues. And even after COVID-19, we will be at even greater risk. And so moving forward, I would admonish you to take it very seriously that whatever you do going forward, you must look or think of women and girls and seek to empower them, seek to help them through this very difficult period. I would also like you to remember as well that you were first woman before you became a politician. And so I would encourage you to operate as such. Mr. President, the resolution before us today, I think that persons are getting a little carried away because of a 6-month period that is attached to the time frame. My limited understanding is that the 6-month period doesn't mean that we will be on lockdown for 6 months. It doesn't mean that we will be under curfew for 6 months. But it is giving the authorities some flexibility and some wiggle room in the event that we were to see more cases in the Federation. We stand at Jesus forbid. We stand at 14 at this time, and we will not want to see these numbers increase. And so what we are trying to do in this resolution is to ensure that we have the necessary tools for, in the eventuality that we have to use it, we were able to close the social places again. We are able to close the movement of people. The importance of dealing and managing COVID-19 is to contain it. It is here already. We have it. It is in the Federation. But the way we manage it at this point, Mr. President, will be to contain it so we don't have community spreads. We don't have wider spreads. Because I am saying all of us are tuned into what is happening globally. And in as much as we see the number of deaths, the global countries, they have the resources. We do not have the resources like that. We don't have as many beds and as many ventilators for the number of persons in St. Kitts and Nevis. So it is to protect our people, protect our infrastructure from being overrun in the cases of mass casualty. And so I think that persons ought to understand that this is a necessary tool for protection and deterrence as opposed to trying to confine people to their spaces unnecessarily. Mr. President, we have to think seriously about this decision that is being made because COVID-19 did not come with a manual. It did not come with a how-to-do list. And it did not come with a tutorial before to say, this is what you do in the cases, in the event that you get COVID-19. And so it is a work in progress, number one, and it's a trial and error, number two. And so indeed we will make some mistakes as we go along, but we need to ensure that the mistakes we make are as minimal as possible to prevent total widespread. And so, Mr. President, the Premier would have outlined a number of things and there would be no need to go over all that. But what I want to say here is to register our thanks to those persons who are on the front line, who are working day and night, working tirelessly to keep us safe. I want to make mention of the task force and Dr. Judy Nisbet, who heads up that task force. I also want to say thank you to the nurses and the doctors, the entire team at Alexandra, the EMTs, the orderlies, the lab technicians. We have to say thank you to all of them. And I come all the way down the chain to those persons who are working in the maintenance crew. And there are some areas that we don't even think about that they are on the front line as well. We have to look at those persons at the solid waste department. They're at the end of the train, at the end of the line, but their job is just as important as those persons who are at the hospitals and so forth, Mr. President. And so I want to go on record from this honorable house and say thank you to all of these persons, the environmental health team, solid waste, the health promotion unit. That unit, Mr. President, I must give kudos to. They are bringing the information minute by minute, ball by ball play. They have put out a number of videos out there, simple videos. Even the littlest of child could understand these videos. And so I am so happy that they have brought this as clearly as we could to everybody. And so the constant washing of hands and being the pushing of the social distancing and the physical distancing, I must say kudos to the persons at the health promotion unit for taking that very important lead in bringing the information to us. Mr. President, let us continue to observe hygiene etiquette. And I think for most parts, that is still one of the most important way of dealing with the coronavirus, or even getting rid of it. It might be as simple as it is, but it is the most important way. Washing your hands constantly. And I marvel at the washing of hands, because all my life I've been washing my hands, but I never observed this 20-second thing that they are now telling us. I did not do all the different strokes that they're asking you to do, but we know, we can also that we have become experts at hand washing. We have learned how to wash our hands properly. And so the simple things as washing your hands, we have to maintain. We have to maintain the social distancing. I am still not too pleased about that, but as I said before, it's a trial and error. And I believe I have every confidence in the Nevis public. We are all intelligent people, and I know with time we shall get it right. So I continue to admonish them, I continue to advise them, I continue to encourage them to observe the social distancing, to observe the physical distancing, and to get information from the reliable sources. There is the national press conference that comes on every day. And then there is the Nevis update that comes on twice per week. We can, and there are a number of numbers that were sent out. If you have an inquiry, if you have a concern, call one of these numbers, Mr. President. You will be given accurate information. So I would want to impress upon persons that we maintain all of these observances that have been put out there by the by the public health team, the task force, and the health promotion unit. As we go forward, Mr. President, the best way forward for us would be a blended and comprehensive approach as it pertains to containment. As I said before, it is here. And what we do going forward is to see how best we can contain it and eliminate it. And so with those brief remarks, Mr. President, I would like to wish this resolution a safe passage through this honorable House. May it please you.
Mr. President, I rise to give a brief presentation and to lend my support to the resolution before this honorable House. Before I make my brief presentation, however, let me just take this opportunity to extend heartiest congratulations to the member opposite, the Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons, who just a few short months ago was actually one of my constituents. And so I am very heartened that you're now here now in the House as an honorable member. I know the Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons is a very pleasant and cultured young lady. I think I can still call her my friend. And I don't believe that anything will change where that is concerned. So let me heartily congratulate you. And I am very confident that you will do a great job in representing the people of St. Thomas's. And I would urge you to continue to remain calm and cultured and put your best foot forward as a representative of St. Thomas's Parish. and of course I would like to wish you all the best in your career as a politician. Mr. President, we are living in some very strange and unprecedented times, and I would have never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be here in this honorable house speaking from behind a mask. But it is what we have to do. It is what it is. And of course, when we would have started the year 2020, Mr. President, everyone thought that the year 2020 was the year. All we were hearing about was 2020 vision. And people had so many plans for 2020. But nature had something different in mind. And now we are all here. And that is why we're here on this Saturday morning. Short notice for the resolution to extend the state of emergency because of this pandemic, because of this invisible enemy. And Mr. President, we are here because COVID-19 has hit home. It is in St. Kitts and Nevis, and we must take what necessary steps we can to continue to ensure that our people in St. Kitts and Nevis are safe and that we continue to fight this enemy. Of course, we see on the news what is happening. And of course, here in Nevis, and of course in the Federation and throughout the region, we are living in an era now, Mr. President, where everybody takes somebody to court. And I would like to just commend the Premier for moving this resolution to ensure that we do what we have to do here in Nevis so that nobody can say, well, you all did not do the right thing and I'm taking someone to court. I'm going to walk the streets if there is a curfew. And so that is why we have to be here in this honorable house this morning. And so I'm here to lend my support because we must do what we can to ensure that the people of Nevis continue to be safe in this environment and we continue to fight with every breath that we have. Mr. President, of course, the mover of the resolution, he would have outlined all of the initiatives and so on of the Nevis Island administration, and I want to continue to commend those initiatives. And of course, you would have heard from the other members on this side in terms of their support. And so very briefly, Mr. President, I just want to say that I must pay homage to my ministry, social services, for the fantastic job that they have been doing throughout this crisis. They have been working day in, day out, and I was actually at the office yesterday and I passed by the social services department, and to my pleasant surprise, practically all of the staff members were there. Practically all of the staff members were there to ensure that persons are being responded to, because a lot of persons have been showing up to social services, and of course we are there to lend that support, and we will continue to be there throughout this crisis to lend that support, Mr. President. I also want to say that apart from the fact that we are doing what we have to do in ensuring that our meals program continues, that we are continuing to respond in terms of facilitating our primary caregivers to look after the elderly, to look after their relatives, to look after the persons who are sick and maybe housebound. We are also providing a counseling service, because these are very strange times, Mr. President, and people continue to say that some persons do not know how to respond in these kind of strange environments. This is a crisis. And people are at home on a 24-hour basis. Persons are not accustomed to being at home all day, all night, and you never can tell what may go into some people's minds. And so we are providing that counseling service so that people can remain mentally stable. That is extremely important in these times. We must remain mentally stable, irrespective of what support the government gives, irrespective of what food you have in your refrigerator. You must remain mentally and emotionally stable. And so we are providing that service from social services, and I want people to take advantage of that service. So when we come out at the other end of COVID-19, we come out stronger in every sense of the word, including mentally. And for those persons who are not aware of the numbers that you can reach our counselors, we are doing this remotely. We are not doing face-to-face counseling, but you can reach our counselors via WhatsApp, via text, via phone, and the numbers you can reach them at 664-7269 or 665-9565. So once again, I want to commend the director and her team for the fantastic job that they have been providing at social services. And let me just remind members of the general public in Nevis that we at social services will remain with you throughout this crisis and after the crisis. Mr. President, very briefly as well, I just want to say a word to the persons, the 4 persons on Nevis who have been tested positive. And I just want to say to you to remain strong in this. We are very happy that you've been doing extremely well. And I just want to remind our brothers and sisters in Nevis that we should not stigmatize persons who have tested positive. We should not, because we don't know whether or not we can be there who test positive as well. And people have been very insensitive, and I'm very disappointed when persons are sending around people's pictures on social media. Mr. President, that is not good. And as someone would have said recently, persons, as soon as you hear a confirmed case, people want to know who it is. That is not your business. Your business is to stay protected and stay safe in this crisis. And please do not stigmatize the persons who have been tested positive, because the next person could be you. It could be your mother, your father, your brother, your sister. And nobody should be stigmatized. And so we want to say that to the persons who have tested positive, we are in solidarity with you, and we are here with you to give whatever support we can. And please, I want to just once again say to members of the general public, please be sensitive. Put yourself in their shoes. If it were you, you would not want anybody to be sending around your picture left, right, and center. It is not good, and it's a very, very bad thing that persons are doing. And just following up on what the member for Nevis once said about the fake news as well, because this is what we get every day. Now, persons are home, and I can't understand how people are home and say they are bored, because there's always something in your house to do. There's always something to do. Persons who have families, someone said the other day, now is the time for you to train your children. Our children are growing up now not being trained. You have a glorious opportunity. You're home with your children 24/7. There's always something in the house to do. But nowadays, people are home, Mr. President, and all they're doing, sitting down and making up fake news and sending around. It's bad. I spoke about a fake piece of information they sent out just recently on Wednesday regarding the $10,000 worth of food that Hosford is providing, and I want to thank Hosford here. And you know, the Premier would have mentioned it on Sunday when he was on Von Radio. And social services would have received calls on Monday and Tuesday. But Wednesday, when that malicious person would have put this piece of information and sent around, the numbers at social services went crazy. And I am convinced, Mr. President, that that bit of information that went out was not just fake news, you know. It was, I think, and nobody's going to convince me otherwise, it was maliciously done. You know why? It was maliciously done to inundate social services with calls, and then when social services can't respond to all the calls, they're going to say social services ain't respond. Now, come on. How can $10,000 worth of food give a bag of groceries to all the elderly, all the single mothers, all the persons who have been laid off? Come on, give me a break. So I am convinced it was maliciously done. It was maliciously done. And I'm going to urge people, when you're home and you don't have anything to do, there's no need to bombard members of the public in Nevis with fake news. You're giving them false hope. People are already traumatized by being home all day. Some people are traumatized not having enough to eat, and then you're going to give them false news and fake news. And so I'm going to urge members of the general public as well, because you must safeguard yourselves against persons who are irresponsible and unpatriotic and will deliberately give you false news. There is no need for you to believe false news. Get it from the proper sources. I want to just wrap up, Mr. President, and say kudos once again to our Madam Minister for the fantastic job that she and her team is doing, for the task force, and take a bow, Madam Minister. You're doing a fantastic job. And of course, I want to end by commending our Premier as well, the Honorable Mark Brantley, and member for Nevis 3, Nevis 2, for the stellar job that he's doing, as well as the entire cabinet. And let us remind our brothers and sisters in Nevis that this administration, we are with you through this. We will remain with you through this. And this resolution, Mr. President, is designed to ensure that you are safe, reminding you that this government will not put you at risk, and whatever we do is intended for your safety. Thank you very much, Mr. President. May it please you.
Mr. President, this debate has been far more robust and lengthy than I had hoped, but I think members properly exercise their right to speak, and it is an important matter. And so my optimism that we'll be out of here a little earlier than anticipated has not materialized, but I think that all the contributions were worthwhile and necessary. Mr. President, as I rise to conclude the discussion, I listened to the honorable member opposite and the commentary that she brought, and I confess that having listened, I am still unclear as to where the honorable member stands. Because on the one hand you heard this, and then on the other hand you heard that, and I'm really unsure where she stands in relation to this matter. One of the words, however, that she used that popped out at me is overreacting. And I made a note of that. Because I think, and I go back to what I said at the start, it would be foolish of us on the island of Nevis and in the wider federation to mistake God's blessings upon us for any inherent righteousness that we might have. God has been good to us, and we are grateful to God that we do not have the contagion, Mr. President, that we see elsewhere. But if all we do is say we only have 4 cases, and therefore we ought not to overreact, I say that is a misunderstanding of what we are dealing with. Because the evidence that we have seen from elsewhere demonstrates that 1 case is 1 case too many. And if we don't take firm measures, that 1 case can quickly become 10, 15, 20, 50, 100. Then what do we do? Do we wait until we have that to then say it is time now to react? So you see, Mr. President, I think that we have to be very careful. The message that we are sending. Now, some mention was made again by the member opposite about 6 months, and that is a long period. And again, perhaps that is a misunderstanding of the resolution. The resolution is not saying that a state of emergency will last 6 months. I want to be very clear. The resolution is giving the island of Nevis and the wider federation a 6-month window within which to do what is necessary. That is why the language that is used, and I go to the resolution, the language that is used, it says up to a period of 6 months. And that is important, you know. Up to a period of 6 months. What that says, and to put it in the simplest of language that I can muster, if tomorrow, Mr. President, the good people of our COVID-19 task force were to say to us, you can now go forward and say all clear. We have won the battle. The war is over. COVID has been defeated. Then all of this goes away tomorrow. If they tell us in 2 weeks, or a month, then it goes away then. All that we're doing is creating an outer buffer. We're saying up to 6 months. Otherwise, you see, Mr. President, if we say 1 week, we'd have to come back in here next week. 1 week, we come back in the following week. By saying 6 months, we create an outer boundary, and we then allow the technical people to give the necessary advice. So that if in 2 weeks' time they give us the all clear, we come back here and we say, Mr. President, praise be to God, the battle has been won. But no effort at this stage, when we already have confirmed cases in our midst, can be characterized as overreacting. Because not to do what we are doing would mean that we run the risk of inundating our medical system, our health system. I said earlier we have 16 beds up at the hospital allocated for COVID. We have another 8 at an off-site facility. You know how happy I am that all of those beds are empty? You know how happy I am that even though we have additional ventilators, that they're still up there, nobody used them yet? So that is not an overreaction, that is preparation. That is a prudent, sensible government saying that let us not take the fact that we only had 4 cases for granted. Let us instead ensure that we have in place the necessary mechanisms to deal with this COVID-19. And this thing is a silent enemy. He doesn't make any announcement. He doesn't come and knock on your door. Say, Mr. President, I've come. I hear the Prime Minister say, Martin, say, if you never sneeze, run. If you never cough, you must run. I don't know where you're going to run to, because if you run out in the road, the police lock you up. But she said, run. The reality that we face here is that we don't know. Any of us in this room could come down with this thing. So it behooves us, if we're going to err on the side of caution, to save lives. And that is what we have been seeking to do. The question was asked from the member opposite, how long will this go on for? How long? Well, if I were a soothsayer, if I had a crystal ball, I would have been able to say. But the lessons that COVID has taught us is that every day brings something new. When we were watching Italy and what was going on there, England appeared that they were doing better. Then BAP, England under attack. UK, royal family and all, get a touch with Prince Charles. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, ended up in ICU. And now all the talk now in England, did they make mistakes? Did they deal with this properly? You see, we go back to say there's no manual, no manuscript, no playbook. And the easiest thing in the world to do is criticize. I used to love, well, I still love cricket. Not so good at it, playing it. But Mr. President, when you are in the pavilion, you know every shot that should be played. You know why? You know face no bowling, you know. So.
Mr. President, I rise on a point of order. And just to simply clarify something that the honorable member might have said, and perhaps he may have misconstrued a portion of my presentation. I did not in any way say that there was an overreaction to COVID-19. I think the submission being put forward really was that without proper measure, I made the point that perhaps the 6 months period is a bit long without proper measure. And so it was my respectful submission that perhaps we ought to, should have considered a shorter period in the first instance, and then monitor that period to see whether we would have had an increase in cases, and then the state of emergency could have been extended for a longer period. So it was by no means a criticism that the government is overreacting in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I just wanted to clarify, Mr. President, my respectful submission.
So, President, I shall not belabor the point, except to say that the clarification really doesn't take us much further. Because if in the clarification the honourable member is saying that we should have a shorter period and then monitor to see if more people get it and then come back for a longer period, that is exactly what we're trying to avoid. We don't want anybody more to get it. We don't want anybody more to get it. The 4 people that have it, we want them to be cured of it. And we want them to be the only 4. So I don't want to come back in here to say, we now have 10, and so we must have an extended period. We are saying that we have designed a period up to, I emphasize that again, up to 6 months. And during that period, we'll be able to respond as is necessary based on the information as it comes. But people are not to leave with the impression that, for 6 months I'm going to be locked down, because that is not the case. That is not what we're saying. We're saying that we're giving the government the necessary room and flexibility to operate. The question of how long, I was addressing that. And the simple answer is we don't know. I understand. I was in the Parliament in Bastia yesterday, and people were demanding certainty. They were saying the government must give us dates and times. And I said, how are you going to give certainty in an atmosphere of such uncertainty? The only thing now is certain is uncertainty. We can't tell people in good conscience as leaders that by the 15th of May, everything will be good. We cannot. All we can do is to continue to implement the measures that the professionals have told us we must implement. Hard as it is. It's not easy to stay home. You think I like to stay home all day? When I look, I could only cook about 3 or 4 things. When I look, the things the children say they don't eat that already, they don't want it again. That's because my culinary skills are limited. I accept my limitations. It is difficult. So nobody is here suggesting that we don't understand the difficulty. This is an unprecedented situation in which we find ourselves. And the easiest thing to do in this kind of environment is criticize. Brian Lara should have hooked, should not duck. Why did he play again that stupid offside drive? Should have done pull shot, you should have cover drive. Because when you're up in the pavilion here, words have no consequence, because all you do is talk. When you're in the wicket, that is when you have consequence. If you play the wrong shot, you're out. So my point is simply this, that the constant second guessing, this should have happened, that should have happened, I will give this. You know something, the opposition could say they're going to give everybody $1 million. They could say it. You know why? It's just like the man in the pavilion, no consequence. They could say anything. What we have been saying to the opposition and to the country is that, listen, in this time now, we must hold hands. If you don't want to touch me, put on your gloves. Let me hold hands with gloves. We can't hold hands. So, I see Madam Minister watching me. So, I'll say, let us be in the, what you said, touch elbow. But let us be in this thing together. Because all of us, there's been a common friend, a common thread. COVID-19 is not a respecter of persons, not a respecter of party. Any and all of us are susceptible. So there's no need, in response to measures that are being put forward, for there, to my mind, to be this cacophony of sound and fury. All that we need is a joint effort and combination of purpose Because as I've said, only together we will overcome. The good member opposite spoke about the self-employed and the social security benefit. My understanding is that self-employed individuals would also benefit from that social security package. So people like the bus drivers and others. And I recognize that not everybody had been paying their contribution. But I think the government has said to Social Security, look at those people nevertheless, because everybody's in this together. And we must appreciate, Mr. President, I'll take a moment to say this. Social Security is other people's money. Too many of our people don't want to contribute, but when the time comes, they want to collect. And I'm going to say it because it's true. Social Security keeps saying to people, register if you're self-employed, pay. If you're an employee, too many people don't want to pay. But now, they rush and they say, I want to collect. Well, how are you going to collect? If the good clerk here wasn't paid, if minister from number 3 and the minister from number 4 and the good lady member from number 5, if they weren't paying, well, how anybody could collect today? So if there's another lesson that we must learn from COVID, is that if we do the right thing and we strengthen these institutions, when the time comes such as this, these institutions are better able to assist us. And so I would hope that this is a clarion call for people out there. A fella called me, he said he wants to benefit, but he'll be honest, he don't usually pay. I tell him, I say, well, go and try your best, because we're trying to see how many people we can benefit. But this is a wake-up call for all of us. Do the right thing. Self-employed individuals are covered. We have also indicated that through social services, there's a range of other responses. Some people are getting the PAP, Poverty Alleviation Program, $500 a month. Some people are getting food vouchers. Some people, our seniors, are getting free electricity, free water program that has been existing. We have announced since this COVID-19 an ease on water rates, electricity, relief to farmers, relief to fishers, relief to animal farmers as well as crop farmers, relief to businesses. We have cut the unincorporated business tax in half. Mr. President, I would like that the government had the resources to ensure that every single person on the island of Nevis continued to lead the lifestyle to which they were hitherto accustomed. I would like that. And if a man was making 10,000, 5,000, 3,000, and he's laid off, I would like to be able to say to him, if you're off for 6 months, 8 months, a year, 2 years, you'll continue to get your salary every month. But we understand, Mr. President, that there are limitations on what a small government can do. And so sometimes I hear the sound and say, oh, you're only getting 1,000, I should give you 2,000. But that's his chatter from the pavilion. Because when you're in the pavilion, you're not facing the bowling, you're not facing the music. And you have no need to tell people where the 2,000 going to come from. So you just talk. And so we are here to do what I think is necessary to support this resolution. I heard there's some, again, discussion about the length of time it took for people to get the benefit from Social Security. It's a Social Security process, but we understand it's a detailed process. The member surprised me when he said how many thousands of people. People have to be verified, they have to be checked. And I am assured by Social Security that on Monday the 20th, the first checks are going to be issued. And they have indicated for 3 months, on the 20th of each month, so 20th of April, 20th of May, 20th of June, that check will issue. We are hopeful that by the 20th of June, we would have been past this, but we don't know. And I want to say, as I keep saying, that I'm optimistically cautious, or is it cautiously optimistic? However you want to put it. I am not here to make any grand pronouncements, because this reminds me of crime. When you start to say, oh, crime is down, You get a call midnight, say, something happened. You cannot lay down your guard. And we are here today to say Nevis is not going to let down its guard. Because we must fight this war and we must win it. Because if we lose it, Mr. President, we lose Nevis. Simple as that. So we're not going to let down our guard. And we're going to continue to do what we need to do. Mr. President, I would say one last thing. That I understand that the declaration of a state of emergency is being perceived in some quarters as the cause for people's suffering and anguish. I am, however, asking our people not to look at the state of emergency as the cause. COVID-19 is the cause. The state of emergency is our response. It is like when you have a sickness and you go by the doctor and he give you the hardest injection you ever had, or he give you the most bitter medicine you've ever had to take. You squinch up your face and you squeeze up your eye and you start to sweat. But it is not the bitter medicine, it is the sickness. So the state of emergency, as hard as it is designed to help us solve a problem. A problem that was not created by NRP, it wasn't created by CCM. It wasn't created by Labour, it wasn't created by Unity. It wasn't created, as far as I know, by anyone. It is something that has happened and has come to our shores. And we must respond. We must respond, and that is what we're seeking to do. And so, Mr. President, I end by indicating to the general public that as of today, we have tested 77 persons here in Nevis. We have had 59 negative results. We have had 4 positive results. 14 tests are pending. We still have 46 persons quarantined, and we've thus far released 159 persons from quarantine. That is the position on Nevis, and I keep updating because the information changes. Because just yesterday we got 3 tests, thankfully all negative. The day before we got 2 back, but then yesterday we also tested some people because those who had tested positive are now being retested to ensure that we can give them the all clear. So it's an ongoing process, fluid. The situation keeps changing, and we will continue, Mr. President, to use every available forum and every available medium to bring information. I end by thanking all of my colleagues, all the members of the Honorable House, including the new member opposite, for their contribution. I apologize again to the member opposite. This is not the best of circumstances, but I sought to explain when I presented the resolution initially, and to simply say that we look forward to doing good work in this House, to being of service to the people of our beloved island and country, and that we will continue in that vein to debate ideas and have the necessary discussions, but always with the love of our country uppermost in our minds. And so I thank everyone, and I trust that this resolution will have unanimous support. I know, Mr. President, that the requirement is 2/3, and that we'll have to do a division to ensure that we have the 2/3, but I would hope that we have unanimous support for this resolution. May it please you, Mr. President.
Question is that this resolution be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against?
You have to poll each member, Mr. President.
Hello?
You have to poll each member.
Yes,
You have
yes,
to-
yes, yes, yes. Am I starting?
Member for Nevis 2, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member for Nevis 3, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member for Nevis 4, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member for Nevis 5, how do you vote? Okay, Mr. President, we have 4.
No, the senators. Senators.
Okay, nominated member, Honorable Hazel Brandy Williams, how do you vote? Honorable, nominated member, Honorable Uchoy Library, how do you vote? We have 6. 6 to 1.
6-1. If I could use maths.
Member for number 5, I want to change the vote.
Did I hear? Member for number 5, your vote is nay.
6 to 1.
So 6-1 carried. So it's more than 2/3 according to
Yes,
maths that I would have learned many years ago.
and I've not forgotten.
So the resolution is approved. Yeah. Adjournment. 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 Adjournment.
Adjournment.
Second.
Mr. President, I rise. I move a motion that this House be adjourned, sine die.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion.
Question is that the House be adjourned, sine die. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House adjourned.